My stepmother tried to break off my engagement as a joke by sending my fiancé photoshopped pictures of me with my lover. So I exposed her for the witch she is, and my dad divorced her. Now she is blowing up my phone, begging me to convince my father to take her back because she has no money or job. So I guess I should start from the beginning because otherwise none of this will make any sense. My name's Ben. I'm 27 and I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Or at least that's the plan. But of course, someone had to go and try to mess it up. I've been with my fiancée Katie for 10 years now. We've been through all the ups and downs you can think of. You know, normal stuff like graduating, getting jobs, surviving our early 20s together. It was all going smoothly, until my stepmom, Karen, decided to blow everything up. Now, Karen's been in my life since I was 14. She married my dad, Tom, when I was in 8th grade. Back then, she seemed pretty cool. I didn't really think much about it at the time. I figured, hey, if my dad's happy, I'm happy. I'd split my time between my mom's place and my dad's, and Karen, well, she acted nice enough at first. You know how people put on that face when they want to make sure you don't mess things up for them? Yeah, that was her. But after they got married, things started to change. Slowly, she started showing her true colors. And let me tell you, they weren't pretty. She'd take little jabs at me when my dad wasn't around. Like, if I had a bad grade or I left a mess somewhere, she'd act like it was the end of the world. But when my dad was there, she was sweet as pie. Made me feel like I was losing my mind sometimes because no one else ever saw her acting like that. There was this one time, I must have been around 15, and I'd just failed a math test. I was already beating myself up about it, but when I got home, Karen let loose. She gave me this whole speech about how I wasn't applying myself, and that if I didn't get my act together, I'd end up like my mother. Yeah, she went there. I told my dad about it later, and he was like, "No, that doesn't sound like her at all. You must be misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Man, I was living with it. At first, I blamed myself. I figured I must have done something to set her off. Maybe I wasn't being welcoming enough or something. But then I realized that was complete BS. Karen didn't have a problem with me. She had a problem with me existing. See, to her, I was this reminder that my dad had a whole other life before her, and I think that really ate at her, so she started picking at me to get me out of the way. When I finally talked to my dad about it, I thought he'd have my back. We sat down, all three of us, for this family meeting. Karen, of course, acted like the victim. She started crying, actual tears, saying she had no idea why I hated her so much. She claimed I'd always been rude to her, never accepted her, and that she was just doing her best to make me feel like part of the family. My dad ate it up. I got kicked out of the conversation and left her alone with him, but I didn't go far. I stayed right outside the door and listened in, because I was desperate to know what was really going on. What I heard? Man, it was like a punch to the gut. She straight up told my dad that I was jealous of her and that I wanted my parents to get back together, so I was making up lies to get her out of the picture. She even said she thought I was the reason none of his other relationships worked out before her. Like, really? The kid was ruining his love life? I mean, get real. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just messing with me. She was playing some twisted game and she was winning. My dad was totally hooked on her. I figured if I said anything more, it would just make me look bad, so I shut up. I told myself I'd just tough it out, not give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. But here's the thing. When you hold on to all that crap for years, it starts to wear on you. Fast forward to now, and Karen's still around. My relationship with her has always been cold, but when I moved out for college, it got easier. I didn't have to deal with her much anymore. I'd only see her on holidays, and by then I could ignore her little digs. She kept up the act, of course, always trying to get under my skin. Like, she'd ask me stuff like, "So, Ben, when are you going to settle down?" Or, "Do you really think Katie's the one for you?" Speaking of Katie, she's been my rock through all this. She's met Karen, knows the whole story, and even though she was polite to her, she's always known Karen had it out for me. But Katie? She's not easily fooled. She knows me better than anyone. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, right when everything should have been coming together for the wedding, Karen pulls this stunt. Katie gets this text from Karen totally out of nowhere, with these fake photos of me and another woman. The woman in the photos? I barely know her. She's like a neighbor from my old neighborhood, and the pictures were from some group hangout. But Karen had photoshopped it to look like I was with this woman, just the two of us, all cozy like we were on a date or something. Then she went ahead and told Katie that I'd been cheating on her with this woman for months. She even wrote this whole dramatic message about how she was looking out for Katie and didn't want her to marry someone who'd betray her. Can you imagine? My stepmom trying to ruin my life by faking an affair 2 weeks before my wedding? What kind of person does that? But here's where she messed up. Karen thought Katie would freak out and dump me on the spot. She told her not to even bring it up with me, saying it would just cause unnecessary drama and that she didn't want to get in the middle of it. Yeah, right. Karen didn't want to get caught, is what that was. But she underestimated Katie. Instead of believing Karen, Katie came straight to me, showed me the pictures, and asked what the hell was going on. I was in shock. I mean, I knew Karen was petty, but this was a whole new level. I explained everything to Katie, and she believed me right away. She knows me, she knows Karen, and honestly, the photoshopping job was pretty bad. Like, come on, Karen, at least try harder if you're gonna sabotage my life. That's when I decided enough was enough. I called my dad that night absolutely livid. I laid everything out for him, the photos, the lies, the years of crap I'd put up with, and I gave him a choice. Either he kicks Karen out, or I cut them both off. I wasn't playing games anymore. This wasn't just about me. This was about my future with Katie. I wasn't going to let Karen ruin that. So yeah, that's where things started. But trust me, it gets a lot worse from here. So after I made that call to my dad, things really started to get intense. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect him to handle it well. I figured he'd be all confused and probably not know how to react, but when I laid everything out for him, I could tell right away that he was shaken. I think he knew deep down that Karen wasn't who she pretended to be. I mean, no one's that good at hiding who they really are for that long. But even so, he sounded like he needed time to process it all. He told me, "Ben, I'll talk to her. Let me figure this out." Which honestly wasn't what I wanted to hear. Like, at this point, what's left to figure out? The woman photoshopped pictures of me cheating to blow up my relationship. That's not something you just talk about. But I gave him the space, told him to call me back when he'd decided what to do. I didn't feel great about it. I mean, Katie and I are about to get married, and instead of feeling excited, I'm dealing with this insane family drama. But whatever, I thought. I had no choice but to wait it out. A couple of days passed, and I hadn't heard back from my dad. So I tried to stay focused on the wedding plans and all that. Katie, bless her heart, was handling this way better than I was. She kept saying, "Don't worry, Ben, we're going to be fine. Karen's not going to ruin anything." And I wanted to believe her. But I also knew Karen wasn't the type to just back down. I was pretty sure she had more tricks up her sleeve. Then, one night, I get this call from my dad. It's late, like way past the time he'd normally call. Right away, I knew something was up. He sounds, I don't know, defeated? That's the only way I can describe it. He tells me that he confronted Karen about everything, and she denied it all at first, tried to play dumb like she didn't know what he was talking about. Now, you gotta understand, my dad's not the type to just let stuff slide. He's a pretty calm guy, but when he's mad, he's mad. He doesn't blow up, but he gets that serious, quiet tone, and you know he's not messing around. Apparently, that's what happened. He kept pressing her, showing her the texts, the pictures, everything. At first, Karen tried to laugh it off, saying it was all a misunderstanding or some kind of joke. Can you believe that? A joke. Like sending fake cheating photos right before your stepson's wedding is something to laugh about. But my dad wasn't buying it. He kept at her until she finally broke down and admitted it. But here's where it gets even crazier. She didn't just own up to it, she tried to justify it. She told my dad that she was worried about him. She said she was scared that if he paid for my wedding, I'd just keep asking him for more money. She went on this whole rant about how she thought I was going to bleed him dry and that she was just trying to protect their finances. Like, really? That's what she was worried about? And then she started crying. Again, typical Karen. And telling him she only did it out of love for him. That's her whole move, by the way. She screws up, then tries to guilt people by saying she's doing it for their own good. But my dad wasn't having it this time. He told her that this wasn't about money. This was about her trying to destroy our relationship. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I think he actually saw through her BS. I don't know exactly what happened next, but I do know my dad kicked her out. He told her to pack her things and leave, and just like that, she was gone. He said she didn't even try to fight it, just left in silence. I'm not gonna lie, when he told me that, I felt this massive weight lift off my shoulders. It's like all those years of dealing with her crap had finally come to an end. But here's the thing, it wasn't really the end. Not even close. Karen didn't just disappear into the night like I hoped she would. Oh no, she immediately started blowing up my phone. Calls, texts, emails, you name it. She was trying every way possible to get me to convince my dad to take her back. At first, I ignored her, because honestly, I wasn't about to entertain her nonsense. But she kept at it. She started saying stuff like, "I didn't mean for this to happen, and I was just trying to protect our family." And here's the part that really got me. She tried to make it seem like I owed her. Like somehow, it was my responsibility to fix things between her and my dad. She even threw in some sob story about how she didn't have any money or a place to go. She'd quit her job a few years ago to focus on family, more like focusing on controlling everything. So now she was basically broke. That's not my problem, though, is it? I wasn't the one who photoshopped fake cheating pics. She sent me this long email from a new address because I'd blocked her on everything else. It was full of all these guilt-tripping lines like, "I never meant to hurt you, Ben," and "I love your father more than anything." She even threw in some crap about how she always tried to be a good stepmother to me. That's when I really lost it. Like, were we living in the same reality? Because the Karen I know has been a nightmare from day one. I didn't respond to any of her messages, obviously, but I did show them to my dad, just so he could see what she was trying to pull. He was pissed, but he told me to just let it go, that he'd handle it. I knew that meant he was done with her for good, which was a relief. Still, it wasn't easy to just move on. I kept thinking about how close she came to ruining everything. If Katie hadn't trusted me, if she'd believed those fake photos, who knows where we'd be right now? I probably wouldn't be sitting here planning a wedding, that's for sure. So, yeah, things were looking up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done. I mean, she's always been sneaky. She's always had this way of getting what she wants, and I knew she wasn't going to go down without a fight. But for now, I had to focus on the wedding. It was just a couple of weeks away, and after all the drama, I just wanted one thing to go smoothly. But knowing Karen, that wasn't going to happen. Update 1. So, after my dad kicked Karen out, you'd think things would start calming down, right? Nope. Karen, being Karen, had to keep dragging it out. I was already dealing with wedding stress, and now I had her constantly trying to weasel her way back into our lives. I figured blocking her everywhere would be enough, but then she got creative. Katie and I were out one day, checking out some last-minute wedding stuff, and we decided to grab lunch at this cafe near the venue. Everything felt good. We were relaxed, laughing, finally feeling like the wedding was close and we could just enjoy it. Then, right in the middle of our meal, I get a notification. It's Karen. She'd somehow found a way to email me again from yet another account. I guess she really couldn't take the hint. I didn't even want to read it at first. Katie told me to just ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it up, and it was the same old crap. More apologies. More fake remorse. She kept saying how she didn't mean to ruin everything, and how she just wanted the best for all of us. But the tone of the email was off. She was more desperate this time. I could tell she was getting freaked out about the whole situation. She mentioned how she was staying in some cheap motel and running low on money. She was practically begging me to talk to my dad, to fix things between them. She wrote stuff like, "You're the only one who can make this right, Ben. Your father listens to you." Yeah, Karen, he listens to me now because you finally showed him who you really are. The email went on for way too long, but what really caught my attention was this one part where she said, "I'll make sure to stay out of your lives if you just help me get back on my feet." Now that got to me. She was literally trying to bargain her way back in by promising to leave us alone. I showed the email to Katie and she just rolled her eyes. "Ben, she's never going to leave us alone," she said. And honestly, she was right. Karen wasn't someone who could just fade away quietly. That wasn't her style. I didn't reply to the email, obviously. But now I was starting to get this nagging feeling like she wasn't done trying to mess things up. I hadn't talked to my dad in a couple of days, mainly because I didn't want to drag him into more of Karen's mess, but I figured I should at least update him. So I called him that night. When I told him about Karen's latest email, he wasn't surprised at all. In fact, he told me that Karen had been trying to contact him too. She'd left him voicemails, sent him texts, and even showed up at his office one day. He said he didn't let her in, just told security to make her leave. He sounded exhausted, like he was over all of it, and I didn't blame him. I mean, this woman had turned his whole life upside down. What really threw me, though, was what he said next. "She mentioned something about seeing you and Katie soon," he said. I froze for a second. What did that even mean? "What? Like she's going to show up at the wedding?" I asked, half joking but half serious because, let's be honest, with Karen, anything was possible. My dad said he didn't know what she meant by it, but he told me to be prepared just in case. Now I was officially on edge. The last thing I needed was Karen pulling some stunt at the wedding. Katie and I talked about it that night, and we agreed that we'd hire extra security for the day. Yeah, it was a little over the top, but better safe than sorry, right? I wasn't about to let Karen crash my wedding after everything she'd already done. A couple of days later, we were in the final stretch before the big day, and things were actually looking good. We had a plan in place for the wedding, security was all set up, and I was feeling more at ease. Then, guess what? Karen strikes again. Katie and I were doing a final walkthrough of the venue with our wedding planner, and everything was going smoothly. We were talking about seating arrangements and flowers when suddenly, out of nowhere, I see her. Karen. She was standing at the edge of the parking lot just staring at us. I almost couldn't believe it. Like, what the hell was she even doing there? How did she even know we'd be there? I didn't tell my dad about our plans for that day, so the only way she'd know is if she was straight up stalking us. I pointed her out to Katie, and we both just stood there, dumbfounded. I was pissed. I mean, after everything, she had the nerve to show up like that. So I walked over to her, trying to keep my cool. When I got close, she had this smug smile on her face, like she'd won some kind of game. Ben, she said in this fake, sweet voice, I just wanted to talk. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? I told her straight up, this isn't the time or place, Karen. You need to leave. She gave me this look, like she was trying to make me feel sorry for her. I've lost everything, she said. Your father won't even speak to me, and I just want to make things right. I didn't even know what to say at that point. Like, lady, you did this to yourself. You don't get to play the victim now. I just told her, look, Karen, we're done. You need to move on and stop messing with my life. That's when she really lost it. She started yelling, right there in the parking lot, about how I was selfish, how I'd ruined her marriage, how I was turning my dad against her. It was wild. At this point, the wedding planner and Katie were standing there watching, probably wondering what kind of family drama they'd just walked into. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just told Karen to leave, or I'd call the cops. That got her to back off. She stormed off, yelling something about how I'd regret this. I didn't care. I just wanted her gone. After she left, I stood there for a second trying to wrap my head around what just happened. Katie came up to me and put her arm around me. She's not going to ruin this for us, she said. And I believed her. Karen could throw all the tantrums she wanted. She wasn't going to stop this wedding. But man, after that, I was on edge again. I knew Karen wasn't going to give up that easily. And now, with the wedding just days away, I had no idea what she'd try next. Update 2. After Karen's meltdown at the venue, I was really hoping that would be the last of her. I mean, how many times can a person embarrass themselves before they get the message, right? But nope, I guess I underestimated her ability to keep coming back like a bad penny. The days leading up to the wedding were supposed to be fun, stress-free, you know? But instead I spent most of that time looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next disaster to drop. Katie, though, was a rock through all of it. I don't know how she managed to keep it together while I was losing my mind every other day. We had a long talk the night after Karen showed up at the venue, and Katie just kept saying, Ben, she can't control us. We're not letting her ruin this. And she was right. I had to stop letting Karen's drama get in my head. The next day, I went to pick up my tux from the rental place. Nothing too exciting, just one of those wedding checklist things. I was in a good mood because, for once, it felt like we were getting close to the finish line without another Karen-sized issue. I was wrong. I walk into the shop, and who do I see sitting on a bench outside? Yep, Karen. I swear she's like a professional stalker at this point. I almost turned around and left, but I wasn't going to let her scare me off. I had too much to do. As I walked past her, she stood up and blocked my path. Ben, please, just hear me out, she said. I could tell she was trying to act all calm and reasonable, but I wasn't having it. Karen, I don't have time for this. I told you to stop, I said, trying to keep it together, even though I was fuming inside. She didn't move. I need to talk to you. It's important. Just 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I gave in, figuring maybe if I heard her out, she'd finally leave me alone. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end well. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. 5 minutes, go. She started rambling on about how she and my dad hadn't officially filed for divorce yet, and how she still had hope they could fix things. She kept saying how she regretted everything, and how she was willing to change. I just stood there, waiting for her to get to the point. Then she dropped the line that almost made me lose it. I was thinking, maybe if you talked to your dad, explained that this was all a misunderstanding, maybe he'd reconsider, she said. You know how much he respects your opinion. I stared at her, completely stunned. She still didn't get it. After everything she'd done, she still thought I'd be the one to fix things for her. Like, how delusional can someone be? Are you serious right now? I asked, not even trying to hide my frustration. You want me to help you after everything you've done? She looked at me with this pathetic expression, like she thought I was actually going to feel bad for her. Ben, I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to protect our family. I love your father, and I love you too. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. You love me? Really? You tried to ruin my wedding. You've made my life hell since the day you married my dad, and now you're asking for my help?" She looked like she was going to cry, but I wasn't falling for it. "Karen, you need to move on. It's over. My dad's done, and so am I." That's when she snapped. The calm, reasonable act went out the window. She started yelling right there in front of the shop about how I was turning my dad against her, how I was destroying her life. She even accused me of stealing my dad from her. It was wild. People walking by were staring, and I could feel my face getting hot from embarrassment. I didn't even bother responding. I just walked past her and went into the shop. I could hear her still yelling as I left her outside. The whole thing was a mess. Later that day, I called my dad to tell him what happened. He wasn't surprised. Apparently, Karen had been trying to pull the same stunt with him, showing up at his office, leaving notes at his door. He told me he was done with her, but honestly, I didn't believe him. I've seen too many people get sucked back into Karen's drama. She's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you get. I didn't hear from Karen for a few days after that, and I started to think maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the hint. I was wrong. It was 2 days before the wedding, and Katie and I were meeting up with my parents for a final dinner before the big day. We were sitting at this nice little restaurant, just chatting about the wedding and the honeymoon plans, when my dad's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I could see his face tense up. "What's wrong?" I asked, already knowing it wasn't good. "It's Karen," he said, putting the phone down. "She's threatening to show up at the wedding if I don't talk to her." My heart sank. I knew it. I knew she wouldn't just let it go. My dad looked at me, his face full of regret. "I'm sorry, Ben. I thought I could handle it, but she's not backing down." Katie reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure this out," she said, but I could see the worry in her eyes too. We spent the rest of the night coming up with a plan. We couldn't risk Karen showing up and ruining the wedding. My dad offered to hire extra security, but I wasn't sure if that would be enough. I knew Karen. If she wanted to cause trouble, she'd find a way. As we were leaving the restaurant, my dad pulled me aside. "Ben, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I should have seen this coming a long time ago." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, Dad. Karen's always been like this. We just didn't see it until now." He nodded, but I could tell he was beating himself up about it. I didn't blame him, though. Karen had fooled a lot of people over the years. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what Karen might do. Part of me wanted to believe she wouldn't actually show up, but the other part of me knew she was desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. The wedding was 2 days away, and I had no idea what to expect. All I knew was that Karen wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Update 3. The wedding day finally came, and I was on edge from the moment I woke up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was excited. I was finally marrying Katie, and that was all I ever wanted. But Karen had been lurking in the back of my mind for days, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was going to try something. Even with the extra security we had lined up, I still felt like we weren't totally in the clear. Katie and I had talked about it 100 times. We knew there was a chance Karen would show up, and we were ready to handle it if she did. But honestly, we were both hoping she'd finally gotten the hint and would stay far away from our wedding. Spoiler, she didn't. I spent the morning getting ready with my groomsmen, just the usual stuff, trying to stay calm, joking around to keep my mind off the potential disaster that could be looming. The venue was all set up, and Katie was somewhere across the hall getting ready with her bridesmaids. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from my dad saying, "Karen's here," but everything seemed fine so far. No news was good news, right? That was until about an hour before the ceremony. I was standing in the back room with my best man Mark when my phone buzzed. I saw it was a text from my dad, and my stomach immediately dropped. I opened it up, and sure enough, it was exactly what I didn't want to see. "Karen's outside the venue. Security's holding her at the gate." I stared at the message for a second. Like maybe if I didn't respond, it would somehow make the problem go away. But I knew that wasn't how things worked. Karen had actually shown up. She'd really crossed that line. Mark saw the look on my face and asked what was up. I told him the situation, and he gave me this look like, "Dude, what do we even do now?" I didn't have a clue, but I wasn't about to let Karen ruin the biggest day of my life. So I grabbed my phone and called my dad. He picked up right away. "Ben, she's refusing to leave," he said, sounding exhausted. "Security's doing their best, but she's making a scene." Of course she was. Karen never did anything quietly. "What's she even saying?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "She's going on about how you're making a huge mistake, how she has proof that Katie isn't right for you." My dad sounded pissed. "It's the same nonsense she's been spewing for weeks." "All right, keep her there." Don't let her anywhere near the venue, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll be right out. I hung up and turned to Mark. I'm going to deal with this. Just keep Katie calm. Don't let her know what's going on, all right? Mark nodded. You got it, man. You sure you want to handle this? I didn't really want to, but what choice did I have? Karen wasn't going to leave unless I made it clear once and for all that she had no place in my life anymore. I walked out to the front of the venue, where the security guys were standing at the gate. Sure enough, there she was, standing there with that same look on her face, like she was some sort of martyr, like she was the victim here. It made me sick. The security guard spotted me and nodded. This her? He asked, like he didn't already know. Yeah, I sighed. I'll talk to her. Karen's eyes lit up when she saw me and she stepped forward, but the guard put his hand out to stop her. Ben, thank God, she said, like I was her savior or something. Please, just let me talk to you. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking this was going to be a conversation. Karen, what the hell are you doing here? I said, keeping my distance. I'm trying to save you from making a huge mistake, she said, like she was genuinely concerned. I've been trying to reach you, but you keep shutting me out. You need to listen to me. Katie isn't right for you. She's been lying to you this whole time. Here we go again. I couldn't believe she was pulling this same crap even now. Karen, you're delusional, I said straight up. There's nothing you can say or do that's going to change what's happening today. I'm marrying Katie and you're not welcome here. She flinched, like my words actually hurt her. Ben, please, I have proof. I overheard her talking to someone about how she's only with you for your money. She's going to ruin your life. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. How far was she willing to go with this? She'd already faked photos of me cheating, and now she was making up some ridiculous lie about Katie. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I said, shaking my head. Katie doesn't care about my money, and you know that. You're just trying to tear us apart because you're miserable. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. This ends now, Karen. You need to leave. I'm serious. You've already lost my dad, and if you keep this up, you'll lose any chance of ever having a relationship with me again. Get out of here, or I'll have security drag you out. Your choice. I could see her starting to panic. She wasn't used to people standing up to her like this. She was used to manipulating her way through situations, but this time, it wasn't working. She glanced at the security guys, then back at me, her face going pale. Please, Ben, don't do this, she said, her voice shaking now. I'm your family. No, you're not, I said, my voice steady. Not anymore. She stood there for a second, looking like she didn't know what to do. Then, finally, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, waiting to make sure she was really leaving. I didn't turn around until I saw her car pull out of the lot and disappear down the street. I let out a long breath, feeling the tension leave my body for the first time in weeks. She was gone, finally. When I walked back into the venue, Mark was waiting for me. Everything good? He asked. Yeah, I said, smiling for what felt like the first time all day. She's gone. He clapped me on the back. Good. Let's get you married, man. And that's exactly what happened. The ceremony went off without a hitch. Katie looked absolutely stunning. And when I saw her walking down the aisle, everything else just faded away. For the first time in forever, it felt like Karen wasn't looming over us anymore. It was just me, Katie, and the start of our new life together. And you know what? We had the perfect day. No more drama, no more Karen, just us. Dad and stepmom find out they have a year left to force me split my late mom's money with their kids, so they make my life miserable, and I did this. All right, so here's the deal. I'm Alex, 17 now, and I'm not just any regular teenager. My story's a bit, well, let's just say different from most. It all starts with my mom, who died when I was 7. That was tough, of course, but little did I know back then she left me something big. Like, really big. But we'll get into that soon. Now, my dad remarried when I was about 9 to Rachel, who came with her daughter, Madison. Rachel's all right, I guess, but she's definitely the type who tries too hard to act like she's everyone's best friend. And Madison, she's like a year younger than me, and let's just say we don't exactly click. Not that she's done anything majorly wrong, it's just she's always had that I deserve it all vibe. Oh, and I have a half-brother, Jake, who's 5 now. He's cool, just a little kid, so no drama there. Yet. But let's rewind to last year when I found out about the money. See, my grandparents, who are my mom's parents, sat me down for a serious talk. I thought it was going to be about college or maybe some boring life advice or whatever, but nope. They dropped the biggest bomb on me. Turns out I'm going to inherit between $500,000 to $1 million when I turn 18. Yeah, you read that right. My grandparents were super successful business people. They ran this business for years, made a ton of money, and sold it. Instead of keeping any for themselves, they put it all into this trust fund for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't jumping up and down when they told me. I mean, my mom died, and money's not exactly something that can replace that. But still, the idea of having that kind of cash was pretty wild to think about. Like, 1 minute, you're just a regular teenager with part time job dreams, and the next, you're going to be set for life. Kind of a lot to process. My mom had this whole plan set up before she passed. She wanted to make sure that if anything happened to her, I'd be taken care of. She didn't want my dad, or worse, his new wife and kids, getting their hands on it. My grandparents kept adding to the fund after she was gone, and they've been managing it ever since. Smart, right? They even made sure that my dad had no clue about how much was actually in the account. Fast forward to last year, and my grandparents figured it was time I knew the truth. They wanted me to be prepared, not just hit 18 and suddenly have all this money with no clue what to do with it. They explained that my mom set this up to secure my future, and only mine. Not for Madison, not for Jake, and certainly not for Rachel. Just me. At first, I didn't really think much about telling my dad. I figured he already knew it was a decent amount and would be cool with it. Big mistake. One night, while we were just sitting around, I casually mentioned that I'd be getting a good chunk of money when I turned 18. My dad's face went from chill to complete shock. Like the color drained out of his face and his jaw just kind of hung there. I guess he didn't expect me to be sitting on a gold mine. He started asking all these questions like, how much, where's it from, who's in charge of it, all that stuff. And, I didn't want to lie or anything, so I told him. Well, next thing I know, he's talking to Rachel about it, and things went south fast. I mean, they sat me down like we were having some kind of intervention. They start talking about family and sharing the wealth, and how Madison has big dreams of going to law school, but won't be able to afford it unless she gets some help. And by help, they meant my money. Not only that, but they also brought up Jake like, oh, he's only 5 now, but what about when he needs to go to college? It would be so great if you could help set him up for his future. I sat there in disbelief. I mean, are you kidding me? This money was saved by my mom and my grandparents, and they expect me to just hand it over because they can't figure out how to pay for their own kids' stuff? I told them straight up, this money is mine. My mom and my grandparents made sure it's for me, not for Madison or Jake. And that's when Rachel flipped. She went on this whole rant about how I'm being selfish and how it's not fair to keep that kind of money all to myself when I have 2 siblings who could really use it to better their lives. My dad was nodding along like she was making the most logical argument in the world, and I just couldn't believe it. They were acting like I owed them something. Rachel kept pushing, saying things like, how could you even think of blowing all that money on yourself when you could change someone else's life? Don't you care about your family? But let me tell you, it was never about family for them. It was all about getting their hands on the cash. I stood my ground, though. I told them that I wasn't going to share it, and if they were upset about that, then so be it. They both looked at me like I just slapped them in the face. My dad tried to reason with me, saying things like, I'm not asking you to give all of it, just a portion. Think about how much this could help us out. But again, us? No, this money isn't our money, it's mine. After that, the mood in the house changed. My dad and Rachel didn't talk to me much for a while. They kept their distance, but I could tell they were stewing over it. I overheard Rachel talking to Madison one night, telling her not to worry, that they'd figure something out. I couldn't help but feel like they were planning something behind my back. The thing is, I'm not stupid. I know they're just biding their time, waiting for me to crack, or maybe hoping they can guilt trip me into giving them something. But they don't understand that my mom set this up for a reason. She knew this might happen, and that's why she made sure the money stayed locked down until I'm 18. And honestly, I'm not backing down. This is about more than just money. It's about my mom's legacy, what she wanted for me, and not letting anyone take that away. Not Rachel, not Madison, not even my dad. They can try all they want, but they're not getting a penny. All right, so after the whole money thing blew up, things at home got even weirder. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you can feel people talking about you behind your back, but it was like that. My dad and Rachel were acting super off, and Madison wasn't helping either. Like, every time I walked into the room, it would go dead silent. They'd just stare at me, like I was some kind of villain for not handing over my inheritance. It was awkward as hell. Anyway, one day, Rachel decided to take things up a notch. She pulled me aside in the kitchen and tried to have this heart-to-heart conversation. I was just trying to make a sandwich, and she comes at me with, Alex, I think you're making a mistake. You're young, and you don't understand the value of family yet. When you get older, you'll see that helping out your siblings is more important than any amount of money. I just looked at her and said, they're not my siblings. Madison isn't even blood related, and Jake's my half-brother. This money has nothing to do with them. She looked shocked, like I just insulted her entire existence. But come on, was I supposed to just roll over and agree with her guilt trip? Rachel wasn't done, though. She tried to go on about how family isn't just about blood, and how I should show compassion, but I wasn't buying any of it. It was the same old routine, make me feel bad, get me to agree to give them money, and everyone's happy. Except me, of course. Things hit a real turning point about a week later. My dad and I had this huge blow-up argument, and honestly, I didn't see it coming. He had been pretty quiet after the initial conversation, so I thought maybe he'd let it go. I was wrong. One night he comes home from work, and I can already tell something's up. He's all tense and doesn't even bother with the usual, "How was your day?" small talk. Instead, he just says, "We need to talk," in that serious dad voice that makes you feel like you're about to get grounded or something. So, we sit down in the living room, and he starts off slow, like he's trying to be reasonable. He's like, "Alex, I know you're young, and you might not fully understand what you're doing with this money. I'm not saying you have to give all of it away, but Madison really needs help for college. And Jake, well, he's got a future ahead of him too. You could do something great for them." I could feel the anger boiling up inside me, but I kept my cool, mostly. I told him, "Dad, this isn't my responsibility. You and Rachel need to figure out how to pay for Madison's college and Jake's future. That's on you, not me." And then he snapped. Like full-on snapped. He started yelling, which is something my dad never does. He said, "I've done everything for you. I've raised you, put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay me? By being selfish?" I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. I mean, come on. He was basically saying that I owed him my inheritance because he did the bare minimum of being a parent. I told him, "This money is from Mom and my grandparents. They set it up for me. You don't get to tell me what to do with it." That's when he said the thing that really messed with my head. He goes, "Your mom wouldn't have wanted you to turn your back on your family like this. She would have wanted you to share." That hit hard, but I knew it wasn't true. My mom set up that money specifically so I wouldn't have to deal with this kind of pressure. She knew something like this could happen, and she didn't want my dad or anyone else taking advantage of it. So I said, if Mom wanted me to share, she would have set it up that way, but she didn't. She left it for me. After that argument, my dad didn't talk to me for days. Rachel wasn't talking to me either, but that wasn't anything new. The house felt like one big, cold shoulder. I would come home from school, and they'd be in the living room or kitchen, but they wouldn't say a word to me. If I tried to talk to them, they'd just give me one-word answers, or ignore me completely. Madison, on the other hand, took a different approach. She wasn't quiet at all. In fact, she got kind of bold about the whole thing. One day, I overheard her talking to Rachel in her room, and she was like, "I don't get why he won't just give me the money. It's not like he's going to use all of it. He could at least help me out with tuition." It was almost funny how entitled she sounded, like it was just a given that she should get some of my inheritance. I wanted to bust in and say, "Hey, newsflash, it's not your money." But I didn't. I just let it go because arguing with her wouldn't get me anywhere. A few days later, things got even crazier. Rachel decided to bring in a lawyer. Yeah, you heard that right. A lawyer. She claimed that she just wanted to explore all the options and make sure everything was being handled fairly. I knew right away that this was her way of trying to intimidate me into giving up some of the money. The lawyer came over to the house, and Rachel made a big show of it, like it was some important meeting. My dad was there too, but he stayed quiet, letting Rachel do most of the talking. She kept saying things like, "We just want to make sure Alex understands the legal side of things, and we're concerned about how this money is being distributed." The lawyer, though, didn't seem all that interested. He basically told them that there wasn't much they could do because the money was in a trust set up by my mom and grandparents. It was airtight, and the only way to change anything would be if I decided to do it. Rachel looked pissed. I could tell she was hoping for a different answer, but the lawyer shut her down pretty quick. After that, Rachel stopped pretending to be nice. She stopped talking to me altogether. She wouldn't even look at me when I walked into the room. It was like I didn't exist anymore. And honestly, I didn't care. If she was going to be like that, I was fine with it. The less I had to deal with her, the better. At this point, I knew things weren't going to get better. My 18th birthday was just a few months away, and I could feel the tension building up. It was like everyone was waiting for that moment when the money would officially be mine, hoping I'd change my mind. But I wasn't going to. There was no way I was giving in. I started spending more time at my grandparents' place, just to get away from the craziness at home. They were really supportive, and my grandpa even joked about putting a restraining order on my dad and Rachel if they kept this nonsense up. It felt good to know they had my back, no matter what. But deep down, I knew that once I turned 18, things were going to get a lot worse. All right, so now we're getting close to my 18th birthday, and let me tell you, things were going from bad to worse. If I thought my dad and Rachel were being weird before, they took it to a whole new level as the big day got closer. It was like they were just waiting for me to slip up or magically change my mind about the money. Spoiler. I wasn't going to. It started with my dad trying to get all friendly again. Like, after weeks of giving me the cold shoulder, he suddenly acted like everything was fine. One morning, he's sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee, and he goes, "Hey, Alex, I was thinking we should go fishing this weekend. Just the two of us. You know, like old times." Now, fishing was something we used to do back when I was younger, but it's been years since we actually did anything like that. So it was a pretty random offer, especially since he hadn't exactly been chatty with me recently. I just said, uh, maybe. I've got a lot going on with school. I wasn't going to just fall for the whole let's be buddies again thing after everything he pulled. He didn't push it, but I could tell he was disappointed. Honestly, it felt like he was trying to butter me up so I'd be more open to giving away some of my inheritance. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what this was really about. While my dad was trying the whole nice guy routine, Rachel was up to something else entirely. One day, I came home from school and she's in the living room with a bunch of paperwork spread out on the coffee table. I didn't think much of it at first. She's always got her nose in some paperwork. But then I saw one of the papers had my name on it. I asked her, "What's all this?" And she looked up with this fake smile, like she was trying so hard to be friendly. "Oh, just going over some legal stuff," she said casually. "We want to make sure everything's in order for when you turn 18. Now, I knew Rachel worked in finance or something like that, but this was different. It wasn't just regular paperwork, it was about me and my money. I didn't say anything at the moment, but I made a mental note to keep an eye on her. Something about it didn't sit right with me. A few days later, everything came to a head. My dad sat me down again, this time with Rachel right there, and they hit me with it. "Alex," my dad started, "we've been thinking, and we really believe that once you have access to the money, you should consider helping out Madison with her college costs." I knew this was coming, but it still pissed me off. I just looked at him and said, "Dad, we've been over this. That money isn't for her. It's for me. Mom and my grandparents set it up specifically for me, and I'm not giving it away." Rachel, of course, jumped in with her guilt trip tactics. "But Alex, you're going to have so much money. More than you'll ever need. Madison's worked so hard, and she deserves a chance at a good future. You could help make that happen for her." I had to bite my tongue. It wasn't that I didn't care about Madison wanting to go to college or whatever, but this was my future we were talking about. And honestly, it wasn't my job to pay for her life. "I get that," I said, trying to stay calm. "But it's not my responsibility. If you and Dad want to help her, then you should figure that out. But I'm not giving away my inheritance." That's when Rachel got really mad. She stood up and started pacing around the room, throwing her hands in the air like she couldn't believe what I was saying. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "You're sitting on a fortune, and you're just going to hoard it all for yourself? What kind of person does that?" I didn't even have a chance to respond before my dad jumped in too. "She's right, Alex. You need to think about your family. We've all made sacrifices for you, and this is how you repay us?" That was it. I'd had enough. I stood up and said, "Sacrifices? What sacrifices? I've been living in this house, going to school, doing my own thing. I haven't asked you for anything. And now because I'm finally getting something for myself, you think I owe it to you?" They were both stunned. I could see it in their faces. They didn't expect me to push back so hard, but I was done being pushed around. A few days after that fight, I got a call from my mom's lawyer. He told me that my dad had been in touch with him, asking about the details of the trust fund. Apparently, he wanted to see if there was any way to challenge the way it was set up. When I heard that, I felt my blood boil. My dad wasn't just trying to guilt me into giving up the money. He was actually trying to find a way to force me to do it. I called my grandpa right away and told him everything. He wasn't happy, to say the least. "Don't worry, Alex," he said. "We've got everything locked down tight. Your dad can't touch a penny of that money, and neither can Rachel." That made me feel a little better, but I still couldn't believe my dad would go that far. It wasn't even about the money at this point. It was about the principle. This was supposed to be for my future, something my mom wanted for me, and here was my dad, trying to take that away just because he and Rachel couldn't get their finances together. Things got even crazier as my birthday got closer. Rachel started being even colder toward me, barely acknowledging my existence whenever I was around. Madison, too. It was like I wasn't part of the family anymore. Every conversation was short and awkward, like they were just waiting for me to turn 18 so they could make one last push for the money. But the final straw came about a week before my birthday. My dad came to me again, this time without Rachel. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping, and I could tell he was about to make some kind of big ask. Alex, he said, I know things have been tense around here, and I just want to clear the air. I've been thinking a lot about this money situation, and I get that it's yours. I really do. But before you make any final decisions, I just want to ask one last thing. I already knew what was coming, but I let him continue. Madison's future depends on this, Alex. If you could just spare a little bit, enough to cover her first year of college, it would mean the world to her. To all of us. I couldn't believe it. After everything, he was still trying to get me to crack. But this time, I didn't even hesitate. No, Dad, I'm not doing it. You and Rachel need to figure this out on your own. I'm not responsible for Madison's college or Jake's future or anything else. This money is for me, and I'm not giving it away. He didn't say anything for a while. He just sat there, staring at the floor, like he didn't know what to do next. Finally, he nodded and said, Okay, I get it. And that was it. He walked out of the room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I knew the worst was still to come, but at least I'd stood my ground. Update 1. So here we are. My 18th birthday was just around the corner, and it felt like I was counting down the days to some big showdown. Every day at home got more uncomfortable. You know that feeling when you can't relax in your own space because everyone around you is walking on eggshells? Yeah, that was my life. Rachel, for one, had completely given up on even pretending to like me. She wouldn't talk to me unless she had to, and even then, it was always cold and short. Madison? Well, she'd been giving me these side-eye looks every time we crossed paths, like I was the bad guy in all of this for not just handing over the money. And my dad? He was still distant, but I could tell he was stressed out. I think deep down, he knew he'd lost the battle, but that didn't make things any easier. The weird thing was, in the week leading up to my birthday, it was almost too quiet. My dad and Rachel weren't pushing the money issue as much anymore. And I started thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd accepted my decision. I should have known better. A few days before my birthday, I was out with some friends from school, trying to just live my life and not think about the mess at home. When I got back, the house was completely empty, which was weird because Rachel was usually home with Jake. I figured maybe they went out for the day or something, so I didn't think much of it. But then I saw a letter on the kitchen table with my name on it. Now, I'm not one for drama, but my stomach dropped as soon as I saw that envelope. I knew something was up. I opened it, and inside was a note from my dad. It wasn't long, but it hit hard. Alex, I know we haven't been seeing eye to eye lately, but I want you to know that everything I've done has been for the family. I hope you'll reconsider your decision before it's too late. Rachel and I have discussed things, and if you're not willing to contribute to helping out your siblings, then maybe it's time you think about where you really want to live. Love, Dad. I was fuming. Basically, he was telling me that if I didn't give up some of the money, I wasn't welcome in the house anymore. I couldn't believe it. After everything, he was still using guilt to try and manipulate me into giving up my inheritance. That night, I decided I wasn't going to just sit back and let this happen. I waited until everyone was home. Dad, Rachel, Madison, and even little Jake. We were all sitting in the living room and the tension was thick. No one was really talking, but I could feel that everyone knew what was coming. I looked at my dad and just said it. So, I found your letter. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded like he knew this conversation was coming. Rachel, on the other hand, gave me this smug look, like she thought they'd finally broken me down. So, what's the deal, Dad? You're really going to kick me out if I don't give up some of my money? He sighed, rubbing his temples like he was the one having the tough time. Alex, it's not about kicking you out. It's about being part of this family. You have to understand that this money could help all of us. I wasn't having it. Help all of us? Or help you and Rachel not have to worry about Madison's college bills? Let's be real here. You're not doing this for me. You're doing this because you see my inheritance as a way out of your problems. Rachel jumped in, of course. That's not true, Alex. We've always wanted what's best for you, but you have a chance to help your brother and sister. They're not my responsibility. I cut her off, louder than I meant to. I could see Jake flinch a little, which made me feel bad for raising my voice, but I couldn't back down now. This money was set aside for me. Mom made sure of that. You can't just act like I owe you because you've got 2 other kids to worry about. Madison finally spoke up, her voice full of attitude. You're being selfish, Alex. It's not like you'll even need all that money. Why can't you just help out? I turned to her, trying to keep calm but not really succeeding. You're not entitled to my money, Madison. None of you are. I don't care how hard you've worked or what dreams you have. This is my future, and I'm not letting you or anyone else take it from me. The room went silent. My dad looked like he was about to say something, but he just stared at the floor, shaking his head. Rachel, though, wasn't done. If you can't see how much you're hurting this family, then maybe your dad was right. Maybe it's time you find somewhere else to live. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own stepmom was basically telling me to get out because I wouldn't hand over money that wasn't even hers to begin with. I looked at my dad, hoping he'd step in, but he just sat there, not saying a word. That's when I realized this wasn't going to end well. They weren't going to stop. No matter how many times I said no, they were going to keep pushing until they got what they wanted, or until I was out of the picture. I stood up, not really knowing what to say next. My mind was racing, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to yell, to tell them all to screw off, but another part of me just felt tired. Tired of all the fighting, tired of the guilt trips, tired of feeling like I was the bad guy in my own home. I looked at my dad one last time. So, this is it? You're really going to throw me out because I won't give you the money? He didn't look up. He just muttered, I don't want to do this, Alex, but you're not leaving us much of a choice. That was it. I was done. Fine, I said, my voice shaking a little. I'll go, but don't expect me to come back. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out. I didn't even pack up my things right then. I just left. I called my grandparents on the way to their house, told them what happened, and they were beyond pissed. They told me I could stay with them as long as I needed, which was a huge relief. But as I walked away from the house, I couldn't help but feel this weird mix of anger and sadness. It hurt that my own dad would choose money over me, but at the same time I knew I couldn't keep living like that. I had to look out for myself, even if it meant leaving my family behind. The next few days were kind of a blur. I moved most of my stuff to my grandparents' house, and they were super supportive, telling me over and over that I did the right thing. But it was still hard. Even though my dad had basically kicked me out, it didn't change the fact that I'd lost a big part of my life. It felt like a weird kind of betrayal, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to give up my future for them. I wasn't going to let their greed control me. And now, with my birthday just days away, it felt like everything was about to change. Update 2. So, my 18th birthday finally rolled around. I gotta say, it didn't feel like I thought it would. I guess I'd always pictured it as this huge milestone, like I'd wake up and everything would be different, you know? But in reality, it just felt like another day, except now I had access to a ridiculous amount of money. I was staying with my grandparents by then, so I woke up in their guest room, and the first thing I saw was my grandpa sitting at the kitchen table with a huge grin on his face. He had the papers all ready for me to sign, giving me full control of the trust. My grandma was making breakfast, and it almost felt normal for a minute. Like, after everything that went down with my dad and Rachel, maybe things were finally looking up. But of course, nothing in my life is ever that simple. I barely had time to eat before my phone started buzzing. I checked the screen, and of course, it was my dad. I hadn't spoken to him since I left, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. But it was my birthday, and a small part of me wondered if maybe he was calling to make things right. Maybe he realized how screwed up everything had gotten, and he was ready to apologize. Spoiler, he wasn't. I answered the phone, and before I could even say hello, he jumped right in with, Alex, we need to talk. It's important. Great, not even a happy birthday first. I sighed and said, What's up, Dad? He didn't waste any time. Rachel and I have been thinking, and we really think you should reconsider your decision about the money. We understand that you feel like it's yours, but you have to understand that this affects the whole family. I couldn't believe it. Here we go again. Dad, we've been over this. I'm not giving you or Rachel any of the money. It's mine, and that's final. He didn't even acknowledge what I said. Instead, he just kept talking, like I hadn't said anything at all. Look, Alex, I know this is a big moment for you, but you need to be smart about it. You don't want to burn bridges with your family over money. I clenched my jaw, trying not to lose it. Dad, you kicked me out because I wouldn't give you the money. That wasn't me burning bridges. That was you. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and I could hear him breathing heavily, like he was trying to control himself. I didn't kick you out. You chose to leave. I almost laughed. You told me to figure out where I wanted to live if I wasn't going to share the money. What else was I supposed to do? He paused again, then finally said, Look, this doesn't have to be a big fight. We can work something out. Maybe just help Madison with her first year of college, and we can all move past this. I'd had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. Dad, I'm done. I'm done with all of this. You're not getting any money, and if you can't accept that, then we don't have anything else to talk about. Before he could say anything else, I hung up. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I was going to explode. This was supposed to be my day, but of course, he had to ruin it by dragging me back into the same argument we'd been having for months. After that call, I realized I couldn't keep living in this weird limbo where I was waiting for things to get better with my dad. It was clear that to him and Rachel, the money was more important than anything else, and if they couldn't see that, then there was no point in holding out hope that things would ever be normal again. I sat down with my grandparents and told them everything. They'd been really supportive throughout the whole mess, but I could tell they were worried about how things were going to play out now that I had control of the money. My grandpa, always the practical one, said, "Alex, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. This isn't just about the money anymore. It's about your relationship with your dad. You need to decide if you're willing to cut ties or if you're going to try and work things out." I knew he was right. I'd been avoiding the real issue, hoping that once the money was officially mine, everything would just magically resolve itself. But that wasn't going to happen, so I made a decision. I wasn't going to give my dad or Rachel any money, no matter what. But I also wasn't going to keep putting myself through the emotional ringer, waiting for them to come around. I needed to move on with my life, and if that meant cutting them out, then so be it. A few days after my birthday, I got another call, this time from Madison. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. I hadn't heard from her directly since everything went down, and I was kind of wondering what she had to say. When I picked up, she was surprisingly calm. No attitude, no guilt trips. She just said, "Hey Alex, can we talk?" I was cautious, but said, "Sure, what's up?" She sighed. "Look, I know things have been rough between us lately, and I get that you don't want to give me any money. I'm not here to argue with you about that. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for how things turned out." I wasn't expecting that. At all. Thanks, I guess. There was a pause, and then she said, "I never wanted things to get this bad. I know I was being entitled, and that wasn't fair to you. I don't know. I guess I was desperate because college is expensive, and I thought maybe you'd help me out. But I get it now. It's your money, and you don't owe me anything." I didn't really know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her off, but another part of me appreciated that she was at least acknowledging how screwed up things had gotten. "Thanks for saying that," I finally said. "But you're right. This whole situation sucks, and I wish it hadn't gone down this way. But it is what it is." Madison sighed again. "Yeah, I know. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. I'm still pissed, but I guess I'll figure something out for college." We didn't talk much after that, but it felt like some kind of closure. It didn't fix anything, but at least she wasn't trying to guilt me into giving her money anymore. After that, things got a lot quieter. My dad stopped calling, and Rachel, well, I wasn't going to hear from her anytime soon. I stayed with my grandparents for a while, and they helped me set up a plan for how to manage the money responsibly. I didn't want to blow through it all or make dumb decisions, so I set up a meeting with a financial advisor and got everything sorted. It felt weird, though. I mean, I was 18, and I had more money than most people make in their entire lives. But it didn't feel like some huge victory. It felt like I'd lost something important in the process, my relationship with my dad. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep letting him and Rachel push me around. I started making plans for my future. College, maybe starting a business, who knows? For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life, and it was a pretty damn good feeling. And as for my dad, I don't know if we'll ever fix things. But I do know one thing. I'm not letting anyone take away what my mom and grandparents worked so hard to give me. This is my life now, and I'm going to live it on my terms. My parents canceled my 18th birthday party last minute because my golden child sister threw a fit about her trip being canceled. Okay, so I just turned 18 last week, and what was supposed to be like a big deal for me turned into a disaster. You'd think turning 18 would be a huge thing, right? But nah, my parents ruined the whole thing. They canceled my party at the very last minute, and the reason? My spoiled, selfish older sister threw a fit. Honestly, the party was supposed to be all about me. I mean, 18 is a big deal, but nope, she just had to make it about herself like she always does. Here's the thing, she wasn't even supposed to be home. She had this big trip planned with her friends to New York, and I was low-key excited that she'd be gone during my birthday. It was going to be the first time in years that I could have something without her stealing the spotlight. But of course, because I can't have nice things, there was a massive storm in the Midwest that screwed up all the flights. Her trip got canceled, and now I'm stuck with her at home on my birthday. So, it's the morning of my birthday. I'm pretty hyped, thinking it's finally going to be my day, right? But then, my sister wakes up in one of her moods. She's upset about the trip getting canceled. And when I say upset, I mean she's acting like the world is ending. I tried to ignore her and focus on getting ready, but my parents were all over her, babying her like she's some delicate little flower. And this is where it gets messed up. Out of nowhere, she says to my parents, "If I can't go to New York and have fun, then nobody should." I swear I thought she was joking. Like, who says that? But my parents didn't even blink. They just nodded and were like, "You're right. It wouldn't be fair to have a party when she's so upset." I was standing there like, what? How the hell is her trip getting canceled my fault? They didn't even have the decency to tell me right away. I only found out hours later when it was already evening, and no one had shown up yet. I was sitting there fully dressed, waiting for my friends to come over, and then I'm like, wait, why hasn't anyone arrived? So I asked my mom what was going on, and that's when she casually drops the bomb that they canceled the party because my sister was too upset to deal with it. They didn't even think to ask me. They just made the decision like my birthday didn't matter at all. I lost it. Like full-on screaming, angry tears type of lost it. This wasn't just about the party being canceled, you know? It was about everything. For as long as I can remember, I've been pushed aside for my sister. I'm always the one who has to adjust, compromise, and let her have whatever she wants. They've been doing this my whole life, and I've always just put up with it because, I don't know, that's what I was used to. But this, canceling my 18th birthday party because she's whining about not going on some stupid trip, that was just too much. I started yelling at them, and you know what they did? They told me to quiet down because they didn't want to wake up my sister from her nap. Can you believe that? I'm furious. My entire birthday is ruined, and they're more worried about my sister getting her beauty sleep. Right in the middle of this mess, the doorbell rings. My parents didn't invite anyone, so they were confused. They open the door, and it's my grandpa. Now, my grandpa's not just some regular grandpa. He's the kind of guy who commands respect. Everyone in the family listens to him, even my parents. He's old school, strict, but fair. And honestly, he's one of the few people I actually trust in the family. So he walks in and immediately sees that something's wrong. He hears me still yelling, sees my parents looking like they've been caught doing something shady, and he's like, "What's going on here?" My parents tried to brush it off like it was nothing, but Grandpa wasn't buying it. He turns to me, and I just unloaded everything. I told him about how my sister's always been the golden child, how they canceled my birthday without even telling me, how they always put her first no matter what. I wasn't holding back. I was tired of keeping quiet about it. My grandpa was pissed, like visibly angry. I've never seen him so mad. He turns to my dad and says, "Is this true?" My dad tries to downplay it, saying, "Oh, well, she was upset, and we thought it would be best to keep things quiet." But Grandpa wasn't having it. He snapped and started going off on them. He said they've been coddling my sister her whole life and ignoring me, and that it was disgusting how they treated me. And then he drops the real shocker. Turns out, for the past few years, my grandpa has been the one supporting our family financially. My parents have been struggling to keep their business afloat, and Grandpa's been sending them money every month to help out. So this party they canceled, Grandpa paid for it. The whole time, I thought my parents were doing something nice for me, but nope, it was all thanks to Grandpa. He went off on my parents even harder after that. He said they were ungrateful, and that if they couldn't even treat their own daughter right, they didn't deserve his help. Then in front of everyone, he tells them that he's done. No more money. They're cut off. And then he turns to me and says, "Pack your bags. You're coming with me." I didn't even think twice. I ran upstairs, grabbed whatever I could, and left with him. My parents tried to stop me, saying things like, "Oh, don't be so dramatic, and we can fix this." But I was done. Grandpa didn't even look back at them. We got in his car, and as we drove away, he apologized to me. He said he should have stepped in sooner, and that he didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I didn't even know what to say. I was just grateful to be out of there. Now I'm staying at my grandpa's house, and honestly, it's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. My parents have been texting me nonstop, trying to get me to come back, but I'm not going to. I'm done with them. They only care about my sister, and now that grandpa's cut them off, they're probably more worried about the money than they are about me. It's messed up, but at least now I know where I stand with them. All right, so after I moved in with my grandpa, things started to get, well, kind of weird. You know how when you finally take a stand against something, and then everyone around you starts acting all different, like they don't know how to handle it? That's exactly what happened with my parents. The minute I walked out, they went into panic mode. But not in the "we care about you" way. It was more like they realized they'd messed up and were trying to fix it just to save face. First off, they didn't even wait 24 hours before texting me. My phone was blowing up the next morning. At first it was all, "We're sorry, we didn't think," and "Your sister was just so upset we didn't realize how it'd affect you." Yeah, right. Like they didn't know that canceling my 18th birthday party without telling me would piss me off. It was like they were scrambling for excuses. but none of them made sense. They kept saying stuff like, "We always thought you were strong enough to handle it. And your sister just needs more attention sometimes. You know how she is." I mean, come on. They were seriously trying to play it like I should be proud of being ignored because it meant they thought I was strong? That's some next level manipulation, if you ask me. But then they dropped this wild excuse that actually made me laugh. My mom sent this long text about how my sister's more fragile and how she's always been the one who needs more emotional support. Like, where was this coming from? My sister's 23 years old. She's been out of college for 2 years and has a job. If anything, she should be the one handling her emotions like an adult, not me. At that point, I wasn't even mad anymore. It was just sad. They were clearly grasping at straws, trying to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. But I didn't bite. I just ignored the text and didn't respond. I figured they'd get the hint eventually, right? Wrong. 2 days later, my dad sent me a message. He basically begged me to come home and talk things out. I hadn't responded to anything by then, and I think it was really freaking them out. He said that they wanted to apologize in person and make things right. But here's the thing. I didn't believe them for a second. They didn't care about making things right with me. They were just scared about Grandpa cutting them off financially, and they wanted me to go back so they could get back in his good graces. I thought about it for a while, though. I'll admit, part of me wanted to see if they'd actually follow through with any of this fake apology stuff, so I decided to test them. I sent a message back to my dad, and this is where things got interesting. I told him straight up, "I'll come back home and talk to Grandpa about keeping the financial support going, but only if you kick my sister out of the house." Now, I wasn't really expecting them to do it. I mean, they'd never pick me over her, but I just wanted to see how far they'd go to get me back. The reply I got was hilarious. My dad sent this long, dramatic message about how I was being unreasonable and heartless. He said that my sister has nowhere else to go, and that it wasn't fair of me to ask them to choose between their two daughters. I almost choked laughing at that. Choose between us? They'd already chosen. They chose my sister every single time for my entire life. I didn't even bother responding to that one either. It was pretty clear where I stood. My parents were never going to see me as anything but second best. So I let it go, figuring they'd eventually stop messaging me. But nope, they didn't give up that easily. A few days later, I was leaving school with my friend, the football player I mentioned last chapter. He's been my rock through all this. And I see my sister standing outside waiting for me. And listen, when I tell you I got a bad feeling about it, I mean it. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even trying to act nice. She just stood there, glaring at me like I was the enemy. I was honestly creeped out, so I asked my friend to walk me home. He's a big guy, and I knew if she tried to pull anything, he'd be there to step in. We've known each other for years, and he knows all about my family drama, so he was cool with walking me back. As we started heading home, my sister started following us. Silently. No yelling, no calling my name. Just walking a few steps behind us like some kind of creepy stalker. At first, I tried to ignore her, but after a few blocks, it got way too weird. I stopped, turned around, and straight up asked her what she wanted. She said, "I'm not talking to you in front of him." Like, okay, sure, that's not suspicious at all, right? I told her if she had something to say, she could say it now. But I wasn't going to go off alone with her. No way. I didn't trust her one bit. That's when she launched into this whole thing about how I was destroying our family. She said our parents were stressed because of me, and that they'd told her about the condition I'd set, that I'd only come back if she moved out. She was pissed. She called me unfair and selfish and said that I was ruining her life. All I could do was laugh at how ridiculous it sounded. Like, really? I'm ruining her life? I told her, if I can't be happy, then neither can you. I know it was petty, but that's the exact same reasoning she used to cancel my birthday party. So I figured it was only fair. I turned around to keep walking, and that's when she snapped. Before I knew it, she lunged at me and shoved me to the ground. I didn't even have time to react. 1 second I was standing there, and the next, I was on the pavement with her on my back, screaming in my ear. But my friend, bless him, was quick. He grabbed her by the arm and literally lifted her off me like she was nothing. The guy's got muscles for days, so he wasn't even breaking a sweat. When I got up, I was furious. I walked right up to her, slapped her hard across the face, and told her that if she ever touched me again, I'd call the cops. I was done playing nice. She looked stunned, like she couldn't believe I'd actually hit her, but she didn't try to come at me again, probably because she knew my friend would stop her. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I just turned around and walked away with my friend. When I got home, I told my grandpa what happened, and he was ready to call the cops right then and there, but I told him it wasn't worth it. My sister's a mess, And honestly, I felt like she'd already dug her own grave with our parents. I didn't need to do anything more, but man, slapping her felt good. Real good. It was a long time coming. So, after the whole mess with my sister attacking me, I thought things might finally calm down. But nah, that's not how things work in my family. Instead, things just kept getting weirder. My parents didn't call or text me for a few days after that, and I figured they had finally given up. But then, I got hit with something completely unexpected. A phone call from my grandpa, and this time, it was him dropping a bomb on me. Wait, I know I said no more bombs, but you get what I mean, right? He starts the conversation super serious, saying he needs to talk to me about some stuff I didn't know. I thought maybe he was going to talk about money or something, maybe explain why my parents are so screwed up when it comes to my sister and me. But no, it was way bigger than that. So, he tells me the reason my parents have always treated me like crap. Apparently, they never even wanted me in the first place. Yeah, you read that right. I was literally an unwanted kid. My mom and dad had only planned on having one child, my sister. She was their perfect daughter, and they were happy with just her. Then, 5 years after she was born, my mom got pregnant with me by accident. At first, they planned to have an abortion. They weren't ready for another kid, and they didn't want their perfect little family of three to change. But then my dad made the mistake of telling my maternal grandparents, my mom's parents, about the pregnancy. And they were old school, super traditional people. They were totally against abortion, so they convinced my parents to keep me. But here's where it gets even worse. When my mom was 8 months pregnant, my grandparents got into this horrible car accident, and both of them died. My grandpa explained that my mom blamed me for the accident. She started saying it was because of me that her parents were gone, like I was some kind of curse. She had a total breakdown, like full-on psychotic episode while she was pregnant. She had to be institutionalized for a few weeks to get her head right. By the time she came back, she was better, but she still had these feelings deep down. It didn't help that my dad felt the same way, like having me was some kind of punishment they didn't deserve. They were ready to give me up for adoption as soon as I was born. But here's where my paternal grandparents stepped in. My dad's parents refused to let them do it. They thought it was ridiculous and told my parents that they had to raise me, whether they liked it or not. So yeah, they didn't want me, but they had no choice. And that's why they've always treated me like I'm the extra kid who wasn't supposed to be here. I sat there on the phone just trying to process all of this, like everything suddenly made sense. Why I was always second place to my sister, why they never seemed to care about me the same way, and why I always felt like I didn't belong. I mean, they didn't want me, so of course they treated me like I didn't matter. I asked my grandpa why he never told me this before. He sighed and said he didn't want to burden me with the truth when I was younger, especially since I was just a kid. He thought maybe things would change, that my parents would come around and see me as their daughter, but obviously that never happened. Hearing this from my grandpa was both a relief and a punch to the gut. It explained so much, but it also made me realize that no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough for them. I was never going to be the kid they wanted because they didn't want me at all. I didn't even know what to say after that. I just kind of sat there in silence, trying to absorb it all. My grandpa must have realized how much it was hitting me, because he told me that I was better off with him now. He said he should have taken me away from them a long time ago, but he didn't want to stir up trouble back then. I could tell he regretted not stepping in sooner, but at least now I knew the truth. After I hung up with my grandpa, I just sat there for a while, thinking about how messed up everything really was. Like, what do you even do with that kind of information? My parents literally saw me as some kind of mistake, and all this time I'd been fighting for their approval, hoping one day they'd see me the same way they saw my sister. But now I knew that was never going to happen. They couldn't, because to them, I was always going to be the kid that wasn't supposed to exist. I didn't tell my grandpa this, but after hearing all of that, I knew for sure I was never going back home. There was no way. Even if they did kick my sister out like I jokingly asked, it wouldn't change anything. I wasn't some kid they cared about losing. I was just a problem they didn't want to deal with. That night, I got another text from my dad. It was long, trying to convince me to come home and saying that they realized they'd made mistakes and that they wanted to make things right. I almost threw my phone when I read it. How can you make something right when the whole foundation is screwed up? They didn't want me from the start, and nothing they said now would change that. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was the point? They just lie or give me some half-assed excuse. It wasn't even about me for them. They were still trying to save face, trying to patch things up with Grandpa so the money would keep coming. And honestly, I wasn't going to be their pawn in that game anymore. I went downstairs that night and talked to my grandpa face to face. I told him everything I'd been feeling since we had that phone call, how I finally understood why things were the way they were, and how I didn't think I could ever forgive my parents for treating me like this. He listened, like he always does, and when I was done, he gave me this look, like he understood completely. He told me that I didn't owe my parents anything, that I should focus on myself, on my future, and not waste time trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. That's when I made the decision. I was never going back. My parents could keep texting, keep apologizing, keep making excuses, but I was done with them. All right, so after I found out the truth about why my parents never wanted me, I thought things couldn't get any worse. Like, that was pretty much rock bottom, right? Turns out I was wrong. Things took a whole new turn with my sister, and honestly, I should have seen it coming, but somehow it still caught me off guard. So about a week after my grandpa told me the whole story, I hadn't heard much from my parents. They texted me a few times saying the same old stuff, trying to act like they cared about me, but I didn't respond. I was done with their crap, and honestly, I was more focused on just trying to move on with my life. But my sister? She wasn't going to let things go that easily. One afternoon, I was chilling at Grandpa's place, just trying to relax after school. I had some homework to do, but I wasn't really feeling it, so I was just scrolling through my phone. Out of nowhere, my phone buzzes, and it's a message from my sister. Now, I hadn't heard from her since the whole fight in the street when she tried to tackle me. So seeing her name pop up was a surprise. I opened the message, and it was a whole essay. She started by saying how messed up it was that I was making her out to be the bad guy. Like, she was seriously trying to act like she was the victim in all of this. She said that our parents were super stressed because of me, and that it was unfair how I left without talking things out. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Then she goes on to say that I need to stop being selfish and come home so we can fix things as a family. She actually used the word selfish, like I hadn't spent my entire life getting pushed aside so she could have whatever she wanted. The audacity of her trying to guilt trip me after everything was almost laughable. But the part that really pissed me off was when she said, "You've always been jealous of me, and I get it, but you need to grow up and stop acting like a brat." I nearly threw my phone across the room. Jealous? Jealous of her? The girl who had everything handed to her while I was treated like an afterthought? I wasn't jealous. I was tired. Tired of being treated like crap and then being blamed for everything. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't need to. I wasn't going to get dragged into another pointless argument with her. But the next day, things escalated, and it got way more real than I expected. After school, I was heading back to Grandpa's house, and as I walked up to the front door, I saw my sister standing there, just standing, waiting for me. I almost turned around and left right then and there, but I didn't want her to think I was scared or something, so I walked up to her and asked, "What do you want?" She didn't even look mad at first, which threw me off. Instead, she looked desperate, like something was seriously wrong. I figured she was about to try and manipulate me into coming back home, so I was already on guard. But what she said next was not what I expected at all. She told me that our parents had finally told her everything. They told her about how they never wanted me, how they only planned on having one kid, and how I was some unwanted mistake. And for the first time in, well, ever, she actually looked guilty. She said she didn't know things were that bad and that if she had known, she would have acted differently. I didn't believe her. I couldn't. My sister had spent our entire lives lording over me, being the golden child, and taking advantage of every little bit of favoritism she could. Now she was standing there, acting like she suddenly cared? Nah, it didn't sit right with me. I told her straight up, "You've known for years that they treated me differently, and you never cared. You just loved being the favorite. Don't act like you're sorry now that it's too late." I wasn't trying to be mean, but I also wasn't about to let her rewrite history like she'd been this innocent bystander. That's when she broke down. I mean, full on sobbing, right there on the front porch. I didn't know what to do. My sister never cries. At least not like that. She just kept saying, I didn't know," over and over again. I was honestly in shock. I stood there awkwardly, waiting for her to stop, but it just kept going. Finally, I managed to ask, "What do you want from me? Why are you here?" She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "I want you to come home. I don't want to do this without you." That threw me off. Do what without me? What was she talking about? I asked her what she meant, and she said that ever since I left, things had gotten worse at home. Our parents were fighting constantly, the house felt empty, and she didn't know how to handle it. She said it was like everything was falling apart, and she needed me to come back and make things better. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she put me through, now she was asking me to fix things? I didn't even know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to yell at her, tell her she was crazy for thinking I'd go back after all this. But another part of me just felt sad. Sad that she didn't get it. Sad that she thought I could magically fix a family that was broken way before I left. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. I'm not coming back. I can't. This isn't something I can fix. Our parents are messed up, and you know that. You just didn't care before because it didn't affect you. She tried to argue, saying that things could change if we worked together, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that I wasn't going to be the scapegoat anymore, that I wasn't going to go back to a house where I was never wanted. I told her she needed to stop blaming me for the mess our parents created. She didn't take it well. She started yelling, saying that I was being selfish, that I was abandoning her. It was the same old stuff she'd been saying for years, just with more tears this time. But I didn't budge. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into going back to that toxic environment. Eventually, she realized I wasn't going to change my mind, and she stormed off. I watched her walk down the street still crying, and for a second, I felt a little bad. But then I reminded myself that this was her problem to deal with now. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into that mess. That night, I told my grandpa what happened, and he just nodded, like he knew this was coming. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was proud of me for standing my ground. I was proud of myself too. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting my sister or my parents control me. I was finally free. All right, so after that whole thing with my sister breaking down on my grandpa's front porch, I thought, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe she finally got the message. I mean, how many times can one person beg and cry before they get that someone just isn't coming back? But I guess in my family, they don't know how to quit because things got even crazier after that. For a few days, it was quiet. No messages from my parents, no surprise visits from my sister. Honestly, it was kind of peaceful. I started getting used to living at my grandpa's house, feeling like things were starting to turn around. I didn't have to deal with my parents' constant favoritism or my sister's tantrums. For once, I could just breathe, you know? But of course, that didn't last long. About a week after my sister's meltdown, I got another text from my dad. Now, by this point, I had pretty much written them off. I knew they weren't going to change, and I was done with the whole situation. But this text? This one caught me off guard because it wasn't the same "come home, we can fix this" crap they'd been saying before. Instead, it was more like, "We've made a decision." My dad said that after a lot of thought, they were going to let my sister keep living with them because, in his words, she's family, and we can't turn our backs on her. He followed that up with, "Since you've made it clear you don't want to come home, we're not going to push anymore." And here's the kicker. Sorry, had to use it this one time. He basically admitted they only wanted me back because of Grandpa's financial support. He didn't even try to sugarcoat it. He said something like, "We thought maybe if you came home, we could talk to your grandpa and figure things out. But now that you're staying with him, we're going to move forward without you." It was wild. Like, they didn't even care about mending the relationship. They straight up said they were done because they didn't need Grandpa's money anymore. Apparently, my mom's brother, who I barely even know, decided to step in and help them out with their business. So now they didn't need me or Grandpa's support. I read that text about 5 times just to make sure I wasn't missing something. But nope, that was it. They were basically like, "Okay, we're done with you. Don't bother coming back." And you know what? I was fine with it. More than fine, actually. If they thought cutting ties was going to hurt me, they were dead wrong. I'd already made peace with the fact that they never really cared about me, so this was just them confirming what I already knew. But then, because my family can never just leave things alone, my mom texted me later that day with a whole new level of crazy. She started off by trying to guilt trip me, saying things like, "We did everything for you. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us?" You know, typical parent stuff where they act like doing the bare minimum for your child is some huge favor that you should be eternally grateful for. She even tried to spin it like I was the one abandoning them, like I was being ungrateful for everything they'd done. She didn't mention all the years of treating me like I didn't matter, or how they always put my sister first. Nope, none of that. It was all about how I was the bad guy for not coming home and fixing things. Then she said something that really ticked me off. She called me violent and disrespectful because I slapped my sister during that fight. Now, let me be clear. My sister was the one who jumped me in the street. She tackled me, pushed me to the ground, and only stopped because my friend pulled her off. But of course, my mom conveniently ignored that part and made it sound like I just walked up and slapped her for no reason. It was classic manipulation, twisting the story to make me look like the villain. At first, I wanted to respond. I wanted to tell her everything, lay out exactly how they'd treated me, how they'd never cared about me unless it benefited them. But then I realized, what was the point? They'd never listen. Even if I told them the truth, they'd just twist it again to fit their narrative. So instead of getting sucked back into their drama, I did the smartest thing I'd done in years. I blocked them. Yep, I went ahead and blocked my mom, my dad, and my sister on everything. Phone, social media, you name it, they were gone. And just like that, I felt free, like truly free for the first time in my life. I didn't have to worry about their constant texts or guilt trips or manipulations. They couldn't reach me, and I wasn't going to waste any more time trying to reach them. Living with Grandpa was going great, by the way. He didn't push me to talk about anything unless I wanted to. He gave me space when I needed it, but he was always there when I wanted to chat. And slowly, I started feeling like I could actually build a life without my parents' crap hanging over me. School was going fine too. I had a solid group of friends, and yeah, my football player friend and I started dating. Some of you called it in the comments, and you were right. It just kind of happened naturally after everything, and he's been amazing. He's the first person who's ever made me feel truly supported, like I'm worth something. But the biggest change? I got into the college I wanted. Yep, I'm heading off in the fall, and my grandpa's paying for everything, just like he promised. I honestly can't believe how much my life has changed in just a few months. I went from feeling trapped and invisible in my own family to finally being able to live for myself. As for my parents, I haven't heard a word from them since I blocked them, and I hope it stays that way. They made their choice, and I made mine. I'm not going to waste any more time trying to fix something that was broken from the start. Grandpa and I are closer than ever now. He's the only family I really need. We've even talked about taking a trip together before I go off to college, just the two of us. It feels good to have someone in my corner for once, someone who actually gives a damn about me. So yeah, I guess this is the happy ending I never thought I'd get. It's not perfect, and I know there'll be more bumps along the way, but for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to the future. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. I'm done with that part of my life, and I'm ready to move on. And honestly, it feels pretty damn good. My narcissistic sister tried to take me down, and our parents just laughed it off. Now everyone realizes how messed up she is. So here's the backstory. I'm smack in the middle of a pretty big family. I'm the second youngest out of 5 kids. My relationship with my sister, who I'll refer to as Sarah, has always been a bit rocky, largely because of our 5-year age difference. While many siblings grow closer despite such gaps, for Sarah and me, it just added to the tension. Growing up, I often felt like an annoying tag-along rather than a cherished younger sister. Sarah seemed to find my presence irritating, especially when I had any say in family decisions, like picking the movie on movie night. Fast forward to this year. I'm now 18, about to turn 19, and Sarah recently turned 24. The big news? Sarah got engaged. Her boyfriend, who we'll call Y, decided to propose in a pretty spectacular way during a family outing to the beach in early June. He went all out, setting up a scene with big white letters and rose petals on the sand, a real showstopper. Everyone was there. My parents, all the siblings, and me. When we arrived and Sarah saw the setup, she was ecstatic. She said yes, of course, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and celebration. Our littlest sibling, only 4 years old, didn't quite grasp the situation but enjoyed the day regardless. But here's where the fairy tale ends and the drama begins. Post-proposal, Sarah seemed to transform overnight into a full-on bridezilla, and it seems my mom might have unwittingly encouraged her behavior. Since I'm her sister, Sarah automatically included me in the bridal party, which meant I got a front-row seat to all the chaos that ensued. Here's a breakdown of the demands and plans that Sarah has laid out, turning her wedding preparations into a bit of a nightmare for those involved. 1. Bridesmaids' expenses. Dress. Each bridesmaid is expected to purchase their own dress. The cost? A whopping $300 for a blush pink dress that matches her color theme. Shoes and styling. On top of the dress, we need to buy specific blush pink shoes and pay for our own hair and makeup on the day, which isn't cheap. 2. Pre-wedding events. Bachelorette spa day. Sarah has planned a luxurious spa day that costs each bridesmaid $800. It's meant to be a day of relaxation, but the price tag is anything but relaxing. Bachelorette weekend in Toronto. For her bachelorette party, Sarah wants to fly out to Toronto and stay at the fancy Fairmont Hotel for a weekend. Just the hotel stay is estimated to cost around $1,000 per person. Dress fittings. We're required to attend multiple dress fittings, not just for ourselves, but primarily to support her. Each bridesmaid is also responsible for paying for their own dress alterations, which could add up to another $300. 3. Wedding planning involvement. cake, and catering tastings. Sarah expects all bridesmaids to be present for selecting the wedding cake, the venue, and the catering, which includes paying $25 each just to participate in the tastings. 4. Wedding attendance costs. Reservation fee. All guests, including the bridal party, are asked to pay $150 to reserve their spots at the wedding. Gift expectations. Gifts must be either cash, a check, or an item strictly from her registry list. Sarah has even created a spreadsheet to track who gives what, and she's made it clear she will return any gifts that don't align with her specified wants. As you can imagine, all these demands have led to quite a bit of tension and frustration among family and friends. My mom tries to pass off Sarah's behavior as mere bride anxiety, but I see it as a continuation of her lifelong need to control every situation to the nth degree. She's planning a lavish winter wedding at a ski resort in December, which only adds to the complexity and expense of the event. Given all the drama and the outrageous demands, I thought it might be interesting to share updates as things progress. Who knows what Bridezilla moments Sarah will have next? Thanks for reading, and stay tuned for more tales from the front line of this wedding saga. Edit. So my sister really took her wedding planning to an extreme level that kind of blew everyone's minds. In not such a good way. She's always been kind of bossy, but with her wedding, it's like she turned into the queen of control land. Let me spill all the details about what she's been demanding from everyone, especially us bridesmaids. 1. Beauty regimen. Sarah decided that all her bridesmaids need to look absolutely perfect for her big day. And by perfect, I mean she set up this super strict beauty schedule that we all have to follow. We have to go to hair and skincare appointments every 6 weeks to make sure our hair and skin are flawless. And yep, we have to pay for all this out of our own pockets. 2. Tattoo coverage. Anyone who has tattoos? Well, Sarah says those need to be covered up. The bridesmaid dresses are designed to cover from neck to ankles and wrists, so that does the job. But here's the twist. Sarah herself will be showing off her own tattoos with a sleeveless dress and her colorful hairstyle. It's like she wants to make sure she's the only one who stands out. 3. Hair rules. If any of us have hair colors that aren't what Sarah considers natural, we have to change it. That means either dyeing our hair or, get this, wearing a wig. And of course, we have to pay for that too. 4. Dress sizes and body shaming. The dresses for the bridesmaids only come in sizes 0 to 10. Sarah thinks that's plenty, but it's definitely not cool because not everyone fits into that range. I'm a size 12, and guess what? Sarah started calling me fat and even sent me a keto diet book. Can you believe that? 5. Communication rules. Here's a weird one. None of the wedding vendors, like the people taking care of the food, cake, or decorations, are allowed to talk directly to Sarah or her fiancé. Nope, they have to go through us, the bridesmaids. Sarah set up a special email just for wedding stuff, and we all have access to it. She expects us to know exactly what she wants without having to ask her, which is pretty much impossible and drives my mom nuts. 6. Guest deposits. Oh, and the guests? They have to pay a $150 deposit just to secure their spot at the wedding. If they don't pay, they can't come. Plus, we have to check if they're buying something from the wedding registry or giving cash. And it all has to be tracked. All of this has just been super stressful and honestly, pretty upsetting. It's like Sarah is trying to script her perfect day without caring about anyone else's feelings or budgets. My mom is super stressed about all these rules and costs, too. She's worried about the guests and us, wondering why everything has to be so controlled and expensive. Edit 2. So after sharing all the crazy wedding drama and the super controlling stuff my sister Sarah has been pulling, a lot of you have been reaching out. It's made me realize that maybe my family dynamics aren't exactly what you'd call normal. It's kind of eye-opening, you know? I always thought this was just how families are, but turns out it's not really typical for things to be this intense or stressful. After reading all your comments and messages, I've decided to take some big steps to sort things out for myself. First things first, I'm planning to look into getting some therapy. My university offers counseling services, and I think it could really help me handle all this stress and maybe understand my family better. It's a bit scary to think about opening up to a stranger, but I think it's necessary. Another thing I'm going to do is try to move into my university residence a bit earlier than planned. Being at home is just too much right now, especially with all the wedding stuff and family pressure. I need a little space to breathe and think, and moving into residence early could give me that peace. Some of you have been super helpful with practical advice too. One person slid into my DMs with some really good tips about getting more control over my personal stuff. They suggested I should get my mom off my bank account because, believe it or not, she's still linked to it. That's pretty wild considering I'm 18 now and should probably start handling my own money. I'm planning to head to the bank to sort this out. I'll need to talk to the bank people about how to make my account just mine, which feels like a big adult move. The same person also reminded me to grab important documents like my birth certificate from my family files. This is super important because having those documents means I can be more independent and not have to rely on my mom or dad for every little thing. Speaking of parents, I texted my mom today while I was at work. I asked if she and my dad could sit down and have a serious chat with me about all this. I suggested we talk tonight when Sarah is over at her fiance's place, so it's just us. No distractions, no interruptions. I think it might help them understand where I'm coming from if I can talk to them calmly and maybe even show them this post. I want them to see how all this feels from my perspective, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get why I need to make these changes. So, yeah, that's the plan. It's a lot to tackle, but with all your support and advice, I feel like I can actually do this. I'm hoping this can be a fresh start of sorts, or at least a step towards something better. Thanks for all the support. It really means a lot, and I'll keep you updated on how things go. Edit 3. So, I've been thinking a lot about everything you guys have been saying in the comments, and you're totally right. Things with my family are definitely not normal. It's weird how you can grow up thinking all families are like yours, but then you find out that's not really how it's supposed to be. It's a lot to take in. I was at work today, just doing my usual stuff, but I couldn't stop thinking about all the things you all pointed out. So I decided to call my aunt. Now, just so you know, my aunt is pretty cool. She's actually my godmother too, and she's always had my back. She's one of the few people who totally gets how out there my mom can be. She even says my mom is nuts. We had a long talk on the phone about everything, not just the crazy wedding demands from my sister Sarah, but also how my parents have been treating me differently from my siblings since I was little. That's what you call favoritism, where parents sort of pick favorites among their kids, and it's not fair. My aunt really listened and understood where I was coming from, which felt awesome, because sometimes it feels like I'm overreacting, but she confirmed I wasn't. My aunt thinks I need to sit down and have a serious heart-to-heart with my parents. Not just about the wedding stuff, but about how things have been since I was a kid. She said it's important to clear the air and let them know how I've been feeling. Honestly, that's kind of scary to think about, but she's right. She also said she'd be on standby for me, which is super reassuring. Here's the plan. Once my shift at work is done, I'm going to head home and pack a quick overnight bag. My aunt said she'll swing by and pick it up so I can have some essentials ready, just in case I need to crash at her place for a bit after the talk with my parents. You never know how these conversations will go, and it's good to be prepared. Relevant comments before the update. Overall, she's going to have to accept that finances rule a lot of people's lives, and that if she's not going to come back down to earth, it's going to keep people from being able to participate like you hope. That's what I tried to tell her, but she won't listen. Her fiance makes $120K plus a year as a tech dude, and she's an accountant making $100K herself, so it's easy for her to afford this. Tell your mom and sister that you won't participate until someone pays all of your costs. Your mom should not try to keep the peace when your sister is a raging harpy. I hope her fiance backs out. Okay, he won't. He loves her spice. He's a very calm man now, so they match really well. He's the only one who can calm her down. How does his family feel about the admission fee to his wedding? It's normal on his side of the family. They say it's normal in Italian families, but I just found out it isn't. This is insane. I completely agree with you. The problem for me is that I can't afford it without going into debt for my student loans. Interest on student loans right now is 26%, so I'm scared to be in debt. Tell your mom you don't have the sort of money being a bridesmaid for a sister will involve. Tell sis she is free to include you outside of the wedding party. You will probably find that you will lead the charge. She has 13 bridesmaids, 12 bridesmaids, 1 male, and it's to match the fraternity class of her fiancé. He had 13 people he became brothers with in his class. I don't know what it means, but it's special. So if I drop out, 2 of the guys would need to walk together. Let the opposite important comment by OP. I have talked to her. She says it's my job as her sister to save up. Mom and dad are paying for the wedding almost $100,000, so they can't give me the $2,000 for my expenses. I'm going to university in the fall, and my tuition is $17,000. Weird parental choices here. $100K for a wedding, but let a child pay their own tuition. Did your sister go to college? I'd be asking my parents to pay my college fees, etc., and telling them I don't want a $100,000 wedding equal to the kids. Also, if they can spring for $100,000, then what's another two? AP tuition has always been ours to pay. Mom and dad saved money for everyone's wedding or honey. Update 1. So where to start? A week ago, I was all set to update you all on the situation with my sister and the crazy wedding demands. But life, as usual, threw a curveball. We had planned to sit down as a family and talk everything out. But just as we were about to get into it, my mom suddenly said she felt really sick and went to bed, super early, around 6 p.m. This wasn't like her, so it threw everyone off. Her feeling unwell lasted longer than just that night, which meant putting our big family discussion on hold. In the meantime, chaos ensued as we had to help my sister move into her fiancé's place. It was all-consuming and distracting. By the time we got her settled in and everything calmed down, it seemed like my parents had completely forgotten about our planned discussion. It just slipped their minds, pushed aside like it wasn't important. We finally circled back to our big talk 2 days ago. I needed a whole day afterward just to process everything we talked about because, honestly, it was a lot to take in. Here's the kicker. My dad didn't know half of what was going on. He was under the impression that he was just covering some of the wedding expenses, like my sister's dress and part of the honeymoon. But there was so much more he wasn't aware of. Let me back up a bit and explain the money situation, which is kind of at the heart of a lot of these issues. My parents set up accounts with $25K for each of us kids for when we turned 19 or started post-secondary education. It was meant to be our money to use as we saw fit. I just turned 19, and my dad was getting ready to transfer my share to me when all this blew up. But here's where it gets complicated. Shortly after my sister got engaged, she had this big heart-to-heart with my mom where she played the victim card, saying she felt left out and overlooked. My mom, bless her, tends to be a bit too soft-hearted and ended up feeling really guilty. This led to a decision that, unbeknownst to my dad, would stir up a lot of drama. Since my two older brothers are in the military and their major expenses like education and housing are covered, they hadn't touched their $25K. This left $50K just sitting there. Combine that with the $25K from my sister's account and my $25K, and suddenly, there's a lot of money in play. My mom decided to redirect some of this money to fund my sister's increasingly lavish wedding plans. My mom figured that since I had saved up $17,000 on my own, she could just give me $15K later for something like a car, a house down payment, or even my own wedding, assuming that would be enough. What she didn't realize was how this would affect everyone else, especially me. Now, about my sister, she's always been kind of manipulative. She knows exactly how to play on people's emotions. Thanks to some insightful comments from you all and resources from various subreddits, I've started to see the patterns clearly. My sister used my mom's guilt over past issues to her advantage. Here's some important background. When I was born, my mom suffered from severe postpartum depression and had to be treated away from home for 4 months. This left my dad to juggle everything with a newborn, 2 young boys, and my sister, who was about 5 at the time. We had a nanny to help out, but obviously the nanny couldn't replace the emotional connection with our mom. This affected my sister deeply. She felt abandoned and left out, especially since the nanny was more focused on taking care of me as a baby. When my mom returned, instead of being angry with her, my sister directed all her bitterness and resentment towards me. I became the symbol of why she lost her mom's attention. It even escalated to her trying to smother me with a pillow once, though our family later laughed it off as her way of coping. This should have been a red flag, but everyone just saw it as a quirky family story. As we grew up, my sister's tactics evolved from fighting over toys to manipulating situations to get more significant things, like trips or even controlling how the family money was spent. This latest scenario with the wedding funds is just the latest chapter in a long history of her using emotional manipulation to get her way. Throughout all this, my dad has been my rock. He's been more like a best friend than just a dad. My relationship with my sister was okay for a few years when I was younger, but it soured again when my mom unexpectedly got pregnant with our youngest sister. This new pregnancy somehow reignited all my sister's old resentments and insecurities, and once again, I became the target of her anger. So that's the full story, as complex and messy as it is. Sharing this has been both tough and therapeutic. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to navigate all this family drama, but having a place to talk about it and getting your support means the world to me. I'll definitely keep updating as things develop. Thanks for sticking with me through this long update. Update 2. So now that the background information is complete, here's what happened. A day after my sister moved out, I asked my mom and dad to please finally have the conversation with me. Mom was feeling better, so we sat down and started talking. I told them how I felt, how much of a financial toll it would be on me, how it wasn't fair, etc. Well, Dad blew up. He didn't know about the $100,000 or the things the sisters were doing, etc. He didn't like the fact that Mom used a lot of your father, and I agreed to talk even though they had an I showed group chat screenshots. We worked through the wedding issue I don't have to attend and the $25 for me issue. Dad is signing it over early. When I was asked to go to my room for a bit because Dad and Mom wanted to talk. They settled the budget issue on their own. Dad then asked why I didn't feel comfortable talking to them earlier, so I showed them this post. My dad snapped. He immediately called my sister and told her to come here ASAP because he needed to talk to her and would not accept excuses. She said she would be here in 4 hours because she was with her fiancé and his parents. Dad pressed, and she hung up and walked off. Dad told me to go to my room once again, but to leave my phone so they could go over the post and see the comments. I don't know exactly what happened, but Mom came to talk to me later. She then told me about the PPD, etc. I didn't know about it earlier. We solved our issues, and I finished by asking if my sister would go to therapy because Mom was convinced that the 4-month leave caused this stuff in her. She said she tried, but couldn't force it. I told her if her sister doesn't go, I'm going NC with her, and possibly LC with Mom. Dad then joined the conversation and assured me I would get my money and I wouldn't have to go to a wedding if I didn't want it. Since her sister is charging $150 per guest, she can pay for her grandson's wedding through that soon-to-be bill and his family aren't paying for HD. Apparently so, now they have to. Or his sister doesn't get to have her ski hill wedding. Speaking of the $150 fee, y'all were right. It was her sister who concocted the whole thing and told Mom it was an Italian thing. We talked to Sister Mill when she dropped her sister off. Sister Doesn't Drop a Mill was shocked that Sister had said that there is apparently a money dance, but there is no $150. So on to what happened when my sister came back. She came after 5 hours, and while Mill was there, she was sweet as pie. But when Mill left Olork the gates to hell, she demanded why Dad disturbed the peaceful evening and demanded he drive her back. Dad said he didn't care, and to sit down she refused, and they fought. Finally, she sat down after Dad started pulling out various tricks, including money or telling Mill about her true nature, which I guess her fiancé hasn't seen much of. I was excused from my room again. There was a lot of angry yelling back and forth, and a lot of manipulation from her sister, including threats of LC and C or not seeing possible grandkids in the future. She was trying to get Mom to go back to the original plan, the $100,000 plan, and Mom and Dad weren't budging. The fighting continued and stopped when my dad yelled, saying Mom isn't her punching bag and her PPD is not her fault, and if she was that angry about it to go to therapy. After that, I was called back down and we went over all the issues, starting with the veto book. My sister, trying to defend me, saying I was fat and lazy, but my dad defended me. Sister started to cry and Mom told Dad to be a little softer, which he did. We finally discussed everything and I felt like part of the family instead of like a punching bag. Sister eventually got an Uber and left because she was being attacked. We're going to wait until Christmas time when brothers are back in town so we can all discuss what we need as a family to go forward and be healthy, but it will most likely be therapy or cutting her out. Mom and Dad are still figuring out the full budget issue with my sisters and lost. My parents told them that for such a wedding to happen, everyone would need to contribute in laws. Agreed that $100,000 for a wedding is insane. Last I heard, her sister will get her $15K for the wedding, which is basically $5K because of the $10K dress since it's already ordered. The other $10K is being held for something tangible. And then her in-laws are being generous and helping with $15K 10 to the wedding, 5 to the honeymoon. As for my schooling, Dad and I are going to the bank tomorrow, and we're going to pay the cancellation fee for the loan. I had to take out. The loan only officially starts when I start school, so thankfully the cancellation fee is very small. My dad is paying for the fee because he admits that I should have never had to take the loan out. My parents agreed that my first year of university, along with housing costs, would not come out of my budget $17K or $25K, so they would pay themselves. The full amount that they budgeted for. Me is going to be transferred into something called a TFSA for later in life. Well, Mom and I still have a somewhat rocky relationship, and my sister absolutely hates me. She blamed me for everything and said that I had caused irreparable damage to her relationship with her fiancé and in-laws. Because of this, she's been me from the wedding and from her life. I honestly don't care. I don't really see it as losing a sister. I see it as losing a bully. I made a promise to my mom and dad that I would never treat my younger sister like that. I'm going to be the role model she deserves, and I'm going to be her protector. Like my brothers and my father were for me, I think I covered everything that needs to be covered. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm very thankful for the subreddit for teaching me what a real family is about and for teaching me about boundaries and communication. I have an amazing life, you gorgeous humans. Updated relevant comments. One thing I want to bring up that seemed to be blown over. Your sister tried to murder you. That is a big deal. I hope that in therapy you take the time to talk about this. It's a huge deal. It's traumatic. And the fact that your parents used it as a funny excuse is not okay. It's awful. And I sincerely hope that you really force your mom to address why she allowed this behavior to happen. Why didn't she put her sister in therapy right then and there? It's important to get answers to these questions. And your sister owes you an apology. You may also want to consider making sure her fiancé knows about the money she demanded. He deserves to know what he is getting into. Opie. Mom and Dad didn't make it a funny story at first. It was the sister mainly saying, "Oh, it was a joke. It was a joke." When we were older, of course, because my parents never left me alone with my older sister. Either they were in the room, or my eldest brother was beside me. It was only after I was 10, 11, and my sister and I started to have an okay relationship that the joke was made. I forgave her, and honestly thought it was a joke. I now know it wasn't, and she has hated me since day one. As for the therapy, I forgot to mention she did go from 7 to 10. Originally, it was just a doctor who spoke to her once a month from 4.5-ish to 6.5-ish. But she learned how to say exactly what they wanted to hear, so they discontinued the need for visits. My dad was okay with this. My mom wanted the second opinion and found the best child psychologist in Alberta for my sister, and they took her on for 3, almost 4 years towards the end. They said they taught her everything and helped her with trauma, etc., but I feel like she just became really good at telling them what they wanted to hear. As for her fiancé, he knows I texted him a long text and voice message, and we talked on the phone for 2 hours. At the end, he just kind of shrugged it off. In hindsight, I think he was in on it. He also displays some concerning traits. Do your parents feel like they failed your sister by letting her go on like this for so long? She was neglected and tried smothering you with a pillow, and it was a family show. I feel like your parents are dumping all the mistakes they made on her when they're just as involved. I definitely do think it played a role. She showed signs of some concerning behavior as a toddler, pushing, biting, or purposely hurting my brothers or kids in daycare. But I think the thing that really broke her was not having a mom-dad to the boys. The nanny did me mainly, and her and my aunt handled the motherly things for her. But she's no replacement for mom. The problem is that while things did get better when I was 12, sister talked to me about why she hated me, how she thought I was taking up attention, etc. At 14, she started hating me again because little sister was in mom's belly. I do know that my sister went to therapy from ages 7, 10 because she had a grudge against mom, and when mom stepped in to protect her, then 3 6-year-old me, my sister would take it out on the house mom, or would yell at the dog. Yeah, your dad doesn't just get out the blame by saying he decided not to raise her because he wants to raise the boys, the same way your mom doesn't get to cater to her every demand. This is literally awful parenting you're describing, which made your sisters insane. I understand you like your dad, but from her perspective, I think they both created her and are a huge part of the reason you spent your life being bullied. They failed both of you so badly by not seeing the severity of her apology. She never stopped being that neglected at 5 years old. Okay, I mean, it's not like dad chose to only raise the boys. I mean it in the sense that we only had one car. The boys were both in football, hockey, and lacrosse. They were always on the road. And when dad was there and he would take sister out on father-daughter dates 2 times a week, she would get upset if she didn't get a new toy or a new gadget. She loved these things called pixel checks, even when she stopped using them. And I wanted to play at 3. She suddenly became very possessive over them, and it month 2. Mom was allowed to stay for weekends with us, and she would stay with her sister, watching movies, braiding hair, reading stories, etc. I honestly don't think that is neglect. They stepped in when she showed worsening signs, and I was never ever alone with my sister because of the pillow incident. They took her to therapy, and the doctors gave her a clean bill of health. I honestly just think she's a master manipulator. Opie, in another comment to show you what she's like, she stole her fiancé from another girl she knew, all because she wanted him and didn't care about the other girl. Therapists often wait until a person is over 18 to diagnose BPD, hoping that a child will grow out of the behaviors of an adult. People with BPD are often master manipulators and can fool therapists by masking their behaviors, lying about their actions, and lying about how they feel in a very believable way. Almost like an actor playing a role. They always have a reason in their heads for why they are doing what they do, which can fool others who do not see both sides of the story. Well, as a PhD, I'm about to go down another rabbit hole. My sister will refuse to go to a doctor, though, unless it was to prove she was right all along. They didn't even let me have a LOL Lucy doll without stealing it and burning the damn thing. Going to NC seems to be the best option for people around those with untreated BPD. Don't feel bad about it. Your life will be much more peaceful without the drama and crazy accusations. Don't worry about getting your sister into therapy either. Therapy only works if you are honest and willing to change. Often people with BPD are neither. You should look into therapy for yourself. I did, and it really helped me. Along with reading forums for families dealing with these kinds of issues. Parents are often enablers who try to keep the family together out of a desire for normalcy, but having a disordered sibling is anything but normal. Once you recognize it's not normal, you can begin to heal. Oh yeah, Mom has a therapy session this Monday for the money and guilt trip thing. Her and her dad have couples therapy after I'm starting therapy on my own for a plethora of things. My brothers. Well, they're hundreds of kilometers away, so I don't know what's going on with them. And my sister is playing house. My little sister wasn't there when the argument happened. We made sure she had a play date with her friend from daycare. Update 3, 3 months later. Hey everyone. I figured I would update you since it's been a very long time. I apologize. I lost the log into this account, but just found it. So on to the update. Family therapy is going really well. My two brothers were given temporary leave to come back to Canada. They were both stationed overseas for a bit. I believe they have to go back after this to help the process along. Our family is getting back on track, and my mom and I are closer than ever. It honestly feels like I have my best friend back. As for my sister, honestly, I don't know what's going on with her. A friend of mine still follows her social media, and everything seems well. The wedding was moved up to November 26th instead of December 17th, like she originally planned. She and her fiancé have bought a place, apparently, and this is rumored she's pregnant. She's cut all of us off. And her fiancé. His family is talking as HD about us, but we're holding strong. In other more exciting news, I'm loving Ottawa. I go back home once a month for in-person therapy, but I also have 3 virtual sessions monthly on top of that. My oldest brother's getting married, so while I lost a terrible sister, I gained an amazing sister. She's so sweet. Texts me every couple of days, gets me Uber and eats orders when I'm down despite being provinces away. She's so sweet. She asked if I would feel comfortable being her mom. She's an only child and her mom passed away, and I agree. So by this time next year, I'll have an official new sister. There's not a whole lot else to say. But I also have a boyfriend. He's in the army too. Couldn't get away from it, I guess. And very supportive and loving. Our 1-month anniversary is in January, and I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, thank you so much, Reddit. You are all amazing, beautiful, and soulful humans, and I hope you all have prosperous, healthy, and fruitful lives. I love you all. Sincerely cute. Update 5. Hello, everyone. A lot of people wanted to know what happened at the wedding yesterday, so I will provide the update. My family and I were banned from going, but my cousins and friends and her husband's family filled me in. So, not a whole lot happened at the ceremony. The Mog mother of groom showed up in an off-white dress, and a few people brought their kids, despite it being a child-free ceremony. But no true drama happened until the reception. I somewhat feel bad for my sister because of this, but the MOG invited one of the groom's exes, I guess, to hope that it would break them up, but it didn't work. She tried to get between my sister and her now husband, but her husband and I give him props for this. Told her to leave. Honestly, all around it wasn't dramatic. They made it to the altar and are leaving for their honeymoon today or tomorrow. But one thing that was confirmed is that my sister is definitely pregnant at the end of the wedding speeches. The groom said his with a slideshow, and the last slide was an ultrasound picture and baby. Last name. Sorry, it isn't much of an update.